All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So it is time to start laying down the urethane primer. I have done all of the body sanding to get through the epoxy primer. That is what we are looking at here. A few places where I popped through, but not super concerned about that. The doors and hood are over here, ready to go. So I'm gonna get everything laid out here in the garage, and then I'm gonna start mixing up the urethane primer and see how it lays. This reduces a little bit different than the epoxy primer. The epoxy is a 1-to-1. The urethane is a 2-to-1. So I'm expecting this to be a little thicker and a little easier, I guess, to put on in heavy coats. But we'll see. Let me get everything set up and then we'll get started. Okay, so to start here, I am going to glove up and put on a respirator. I know you've seen in the past I have done the epoxy without a respirator, which is stupid and I don't recommend. But this urethane is especially potent. So I'm going to throw that on, and then I'm going to go ahead and wipe everything down with the wax and grease remover. You'll see how much is coming off there. I always recommend doing this because no matter how much you blow it or wipe it off, there's always going to be some left on there. So I'm going to go ahead, wipe everything down, make sure I get the last remnants of dust off there, and try to get the surface as clean as I can. Then I'm gonna go ahead and start mixing this stuff up. I had said in the intro, this is 2-to-1. This actually mixes out at 4-to-1, and this urethane primer is thick. There's a ton of solids in this thing. So I'm mixing this for a while. I ended up breaking a paint stick trying to get this mixed up. And so it's just, if you can, what I would recommend doing is taking this to a local paint or hardware store, see if they can throw it on their paint shaker to give you a head start on this, because otherwise you're going to be mixing this forever. Then I'm going to throw it in again, mixing it at 4-to-1 with the activator, get it in there, and I'm only mixing up small batches of this at a time, right? I think it's about 20 ounces is probably what I'd say I had in here. Just enough that you can work with before it starts to solidify, and like I said, I found about 20 ounces is what they recommend and what seems to be the sweet spot for me. So we get that all mixed up, and then I'm going to load up the roller, bring it over here and get it ready to go. And this stuff is noticeably easier to put on than the epoxy primer, and by easier I mean it rolls out with less effort, right? As you're putting the pressure down on this roller, it's actually rolling instead of skating. So because it's so viscous and thick, this is going to roll out and take the input from the roller really well. So it allows you to do a pretty good job of smoothing everything out here and going on in good thick coats. So I'm moving, doing the hood in these big patches, half the hood at a time, and trying to get down to the front edge and the sides and things like that, get everything covered good and well, because this does not drip quite the same way that the epoxy primer did. And so with the epoxy primer, I was able to load up heavy and let it drip down the side and I could catch it. This I actually had to roll on and apply to the sides and over these rails. I'm also running into that problem here as I switch to the doors. Again, because it's so thick, that bottom crease there at the door line, it's not flowing into that crease. So normally, like I said, the epoxy primer last round, I could load the brush up with enough to get it down in there. This one I actually had to actively try to get the roller down in there and get that good coverage in that body line down there. But the hood and doors both rolled out amazingly simply and smooth. And so really happy with how that went. Again, very controllable with the viscosity that this has. It doesn't run and try to get away from you. And so it makes it very easy to work with and get rolled out. And now, once this is finished up, I'm going to switch over to the main body here. And the same thing, right? I was starting at the bottom with the epoxy primer. I don't know if you could tell in the last video, but I would load the brush heavy, get a bunch of it out at the top, let it run down the body panel. This one kind of does that, but not really, right? It lets me load up high to where I can go back and keep taking my brush up to that top ridge and reloading with the paint that's kind of left up there, but it doesn't run down the side of the body and drip like the epoxy primer did. So, again, I know I've said this several times, but it's very controllable with this primer. It's very easy to get it to go where you want to, and easy to keep it from going where you don't, as long as you don't way oversaturate the brush and load it up too much. And so by this point I've worked all the way around. I've got the other side done, the back tailgate, working on this fender here after doing the back door, and you see it going a little thick there up at the front, getting a little bit of runs in there. But again, that's all going to sand out, right? This is designed to be high solids and sand out. So after I button up the roof, this was a really quick job, and
All right,
I was
so
done.
with that, we are done. So in real time, that was about 2 hours. And I will say a couple things I noticed. One, this stuff lays on considerably thicker than the epoxy, which is good. I mean, you reduce it, I think I said in the intro 2 to 1, but it's actually a 4 to 1 reduction. So it goes on pretty thick, which makes it pretty easy to work with and pretty easy to spread out and get even. So everything here looks pretty good. There's some ridges and things you can see from where the track marks of the roller are. Well, that's another thing. So I had read some things about people having issues with their rollers disintegrating, which I didn't notice with the epoxy primer, but with this urethane primer, it definitely happened. So it would come apart towards the end. It was coming apart and leaving pieces in here. Let me see if I can find one. But so there's some right there. You can see it kind of came apart and left a little bit in there. It should sand right out, no problem. But you know, that was the first time I had noticed that, because like I said, the epoxy didn't do that, but the urethane certainly did. And you can see I went on thick. There's some runs in here, but it'll all sand out. And so that took about half the gallon to do the entire truck. Again, there's places I need to go in and spray that I couldn't really get the roller to. I'll do that after the first coat is sanded. So it's back to sanding again. So more sanding. We'll get this down to good and even. And then I've got enough for one more full coat of urethane primer. We'll sand that one again, and then we should be ready for paint. So I was able to get everything done, even the top. You know, again, I got to get in these drip rails here and spray, and I got to clean all this up. But you know, all the places I need to go through and touch up and I'll get with the spray cans, because it's just easier. And then I'll start taping for final paint. That's where I'll do the door handles and all the back tape and everything like that, and then I'll spray my urethane. So we're getting close to ready for paint. So again, this will be a 20-30 hours of sanding on this one, hopefully. And then the next coat, hopefully 10 to 15 hours of sanding on that. Should get the trick done, and then we should be ready to go. So I'm hoping to get this in before the fall weather turns too cold to paint. But we'll see. I'm not going to rush it, right? I'm not in a huge rush for this. I'll do it in the time that it takes, because I want it to turn out really nice. So with that, thank you guys very much, and we'll see you in the next video.